Hello, hello. Welcome in. Thank you everyone for joining this morning. We're going to wait just a few minutes for people to join. Great. Thank you everyone for joining us for our Renewables on the Rise 2021 webinar. Just know also we'll be recording this session and we'll also be live streaming it to our Facebook page. So if you have any friends or colleagues who weren't able to make it today but are curious to know what's in our report, you can direct them there. I'm going to start our stream and get started here. Great. Well, again, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lizzie Nickerson, and I'm the Clean Energy Associate with Environment California Research and Policy Center. And today we're releasing our 2021 edition of our annual report that documents the growth of clean energy technologies over the past decade across the country and here in California. And it ranks California's progress compared to other states. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some key takeaways with all of you. But first, I would like to thank our speakers for being here today. I'm really excited to be joined today by speakers Bernadette Del Chiaro, the Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association, Dave Rosenfeld, the Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance, Brian Elliott, the Policy Advisor for the Office of San Diego Councilmember Joe LaCava, and Jolie Jacobs, the Go Big on Offshore Wind Associate with Environment America. I'm going to start with some brief remarks outlining the key findings of our report and implications for the prospect of a clean energy future in California. And then after that, we'll turn it over to our speakers to hear more about local efforts around EV adoption, the potential for wind in California, and the fight to save solar. We'll have time for questions at the end, but you're welcome to drop them in the chat using the Q&A function throughout the webinar. So the report Renewables on the Rise 2021 is the latest edition in our annual series documenting the growth of key clean energy technologies. And this year's analysis details progress over the past decade in 6 areas that will be key to transitioning to a future powered entirely by clean renewable sources: solar, wind, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, battery storage, and electric heat pumps. Our analysis includes nationwide data for all 6 of those clean energy technologies, as well as state-by-state data from 2011 through the end of 2020 for solar, wind, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and battery storage. So we have ranked states according to the growth that they've seen in each of those 5 categories from 2011 through 2020. California has experienced a 23-fold increase in solar energy over the past decade. We have the largest market for solar power in the country, and we've been a longtime model for renewable energy adoption. California's installed solar capacity provides almost a quarter of the state's electricity, enough to power over 4.5 million typical American homes. The Million Solar Roofs initiative, adopted in 2006 and accomplished in 2019, was a major driving force for accelerating solar growth in the first half of the decade. And it helped grow California's solar capacity more than 12-fold. We've also adopted policies to ensure that homeowners and businesses investing in solar power are fully compensated for the benefits they deliver to the environment, to society, and to the grid. And among those policies is net metering, which has played a really important role in supporting the growth of solar power. California has also committed to further growth in solar by adopting a requirement stating that all new homes and new buildings in California must have solar. And we lead the country in electric vehicle sales. California recently hit a milestone with over 1 million electric vehicles sold. And knowing that, it's no surprise that nearly 50% of all electric vehicles sold nationally were sold here in California. It also makes sense that we would lead in the number of public charging ports available, with over 34,000 ports available by the end of 2020. Since 2011, we've also added 589.3 megawatts of battery storage, up from 0 megawatts 10 years ago. And this accounts for over a third of the nation's total battery storage capacity. California's aggressive adoption of energy storage was due in part to a requirement that utilities increase energy storage capacity. So this growth over the past decade places us first in the nation for growth in solar power generation, electric vehicle sales, public electric vehicle charging ports, and growth in battery storage since 2011. In addition, California has witnessed a 57% increase in wind power production since 2011, and we rank 7th in energy efficiency. So in addition to highlighting states that have made the most progress in adopting renewable energy technologies, the research also details the rapid gains achieved nationally over the past decade. According to the report, America produced almost 4 times as much electricity from the sun and the wind in 2020 as it did in 2011. And wind and solar now produce 11% of the nation's electricity. Additionally, if wind, solar, and geothermal generation continue growing at the same 15% annual rate, renewables could meet the nation's current electricity needs by 2035. I want to turn to a video that we have that tracks the growth in renewable energies state by state, horse race style video. So I'll have Ben play that for us.
Has the video popped up on anyone's screen yet, or is it just a loading screen?
Just the loading screen I see right now.
Okay.
Well, if we can't get the video to work, I just thought it would be interesting to share. It shows the growth of renewable energy in different states, and you'd be surprised, how popular and widespread renewable energy adoption has become over the past decade. And California has been leading the way, but states like Texas have also greatly added to their renewable energy portfolio. So the last decade has proven that clean energy can power American homes, businesses, and industry, and has put America on the cusp of a dramatic shift away from polluting energy sources. And with renewable energy prices falling and new energy saving technologies being developed every day, businesses, cities, and states, and the nation should work to obtain 100% of our energy from clean, renewable sources. Oh, there it is. I see the video. So you can see California going down. Now we're coming up a little bit. Texas is in the lead. Great. Great. Well, now I would like to turn it over to our speakers and hear from them. And if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, now is the time to put them in the chat or in the Q&A function. But first, I would like to introduce Jolie Jacobs, our Go Big on Offshore Wind associate with Environment America. Thanks so much for being here, Jolie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lizzie. So as Lizzie said, my name is Jolie Jacobs, and I am Environment America's Offshore Wind Associate. I am very excited to be here today and to share some insights and takeaways with you all about the status of wind energy in California. So based on the report, California currently ranks 6th in the nation for wind energy production and 10th for wind energy growth since 2011. So this puts it behind the leading states in the nation for wind. Those top 3 states are Texas, Iowa, and Oklahoma. But by tapping into the huge offshore wind potential that this state has, I think that California can really rise in those rankings and become a leader in yet another form of renewable energy. Increasing offshore wind capacity has become even more critical of a priority in the last year, or really since last March, when the Biden administration announced a nationwide goal of developing 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. So this goal would be enough to power over 10 million homes, and it has really encouraged states like California to start setting more goals in offshore wind. So it's just been really great to see, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Absolutely. I'm also excited for what's to come. Thanks so much, Jolie. Now I'd like to turn it over to Brian Elliott, the Deputy Policy Director for Councilmember Joe LaCava. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for having me. And yeah, happy to be a part of this conversation this morning. I think it actually comes at a perfect time for the city of San Diego, where just yesterday, the Environment Committee, which my boss, Councilmember Joe LaCava, sits on, heard the first update to our city's monumental climate action plan. And this is something we hope to adopt early 2022, mid 2022. And it was really a game changer for our city, but I think hopefully will set the pace for a lot of cities, both our size and across the country, as we want to get net zero emissions by 2035. So I think the CAP climate action plan lays out a strategy of how to do that. That includes decarbonization of buildings, both existing and new, which is very aggressive. It, as we're going to talk a lot about today, includes a lot of EV charging, EV adoption. It continues our goal of 100% renewable energy and electricity by 2035, which we are on pace to do, and sets a lot of major resiliency standards around water and tree canopy. So excited to be a part of this conversation and talk about kind of how we're leading and hopefully leading in San Diego, but also learn from others on how we can also improve.
And you're absolutely right, Brian, that cities and states really are leading the way, especially here in California. It's incredible to see the initiatives that cities are taking on up and down the state and the work that San Diego is doing. So thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Now I'd like to turn it over to Bernadette Del Chiaro, the Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association. Thank you so much, Bernadette.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks, Lizzie, for having me. And Ben, thank you for persevering on that video. I think that video is so cool, both in terms of just showing how many states are racing to the top on clean energy, and they're not their usual cast of characters, right? That California and Texas are in this battle. You know, it's just wonderful because we know that this is not a left and right coastal inland issue. This is an all-American issue, and everybody embraces renewable energy. It's a no-brainer thing. So thank you for persevering. Nothing like Facebook Live broadcasts that mess with every technology instrument you can think of. I have so much to say, but just, you know, California has only begun, speaking from California, and this is true in every state across the country, we have only just begun decarbonizing our energy economy. You know, if you think about it, in California, we're at roughly 30% of our electric grid is renewable. And in the next couple of years, we're going to see a major decline in hydro. That means so 70% of California's electricity is coming from either natural gas or it's coming from hydroelectric plants that are diminishing their output because of climate change, or it's coming from nuclear power plants that are about to be shut down because of serious public safety issues around fault lines. So we not only have to accelerate our needs to get out of the fossil fuel industry on the side of the electricity side of all this, but we actually have to now replace all of those other non-fossil resources all within the next couple of years. Now, California has been brilliant at putting out big ideas and with long timelines, but we have not done such a good job at making sure that we're building renewable energy right now, this year. And I think that's what that little race a little bit shows, is that some of the other states are outbuilding us in a way that we really should continue to win on. But I embrace that competition, and I think California can get around it. I think we just got a little off track for the past couple of years, and that's with regards to wind and solar and other forms of renewable energy. The last thing I'll say is we also need more energy storage. Energy storage is the bridge between the sun shining during the day and the wind starting to blow at night. Of course, offshore wind is great. And Jolie, your job title might be the best job title in the world. But we need that energy storage piece to make that sun shine at night and help augment and actually truly decarbonize not just our electricity sector, but our transportation and industry as well. And I want to just share one little interesting tidbit, and maybe you guys can start tracking energy storage as well, is California has actually built the largest battery in the world. And it's not where a lot of people who are into tracking such things thinks it is. Right now, if you were to Google largest battery in the world, you'd probably find a hit on either Morro Bay or Moss Landing. They're big utility scale battery projects that have recently been put in place as a way to shut down dirty fossil plants and also start to replace Diablo Canyon. That's brilliant, it's great. But actually the biggest battery in the world is in people's garages all throughout the state of California. We have over 60,000 people that have put batteries in their garage or in the basement of a business or out on a school grounds that are helping to make the solar panels charge those batteries and make the sunshine at night. 60,000 and over 500 megawatts, which makes it the largest battery in the world. So my point is we need all of the above. We need more of everything, and we need it right away. We can't wait for 2045. And that's what this race is all about. And I just want to commend Environment California and Environment America for just always driving that message and being in support of all of the above, and helping to kind of promote renewable energy from San Diego all the way to Tallahassee. And that's how we're going to get where we need to go. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. I agree. We cannot wait till 2045. So it's been great to work with you and others to get, transition to 100% renewable electricity in the state as soon as possible, and do it much earlier than the current goal by 2030. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dave Rosenfeld, the Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. Thank you so much, Dave, for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm Dave. I'm the director of the Solar Rights Alliance. We are the nonprofit association of California solar users. We believe you and everybody in this great land of ours has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility. So we keep track of what the politicians and the regulators and the utilities are up to, and then alert the public when there's a threat to solar or an opportunity to expand it to more people. This is my phone that I'm talking into, in case you're wondering what that is. And a couple of things that I'll just add to what's been said is, so our members are people who have solar, and they go solar for so many reasons. I talk to people every day, and you can line it up, and it's so different. There's many people who are like many of the folks on this call who are primarily concerned with the environment and climate change, and they did it to do their part to reduce their carbon footprint. But so many people, probably more people, do it because they want to save money. Retirees who are on a fixed income and are really, really worried about just the escalating costs of electricity. Working class people, single moms who got a little bit of a slice of the American dream, got a house, but then are worrying about how to put it all together and see the solar as a way to do that. We got a lot of people now getting batteries for all kinds of reasons. And the biggest thing is just the anxiety that people are feeling over blackouts. This is both just the general anxiety, but also people who need to keep their medicine cold, or their wheelchair charged up. And so one thing, as a climate activist, that's my lineage, I see the street level of just why are people choosing clean energy. And what's beautiful about it is we have put policies in place in California that have now gotten us to the point where just under half of all rooftop solar is going into middle and working class neighborhoods. And we are on a path, if we keep things going, and we'll talk about obstacles that could prevent that, that could get this amazing technology into the hands of millions and millions and millions of working class and middle class people, both renters and homeowners alike, schools, et cetera, et cetera. And this is kind of the way we're going to do the clean energy revolution. And not everybody has to do it for one reason or another, but if we make it so that it is in the person's self-interest and they will embrace that and then embrace all of the other things that we have to do besides rooftop solar, all of the above, and then we can get that public support that's just so critical to be able to do the transition. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and back to you, Lizzie.
Thanks so much, Dave. I'm really excited. This report looks at the past decade of clean energy growth, but I want to pose an open question to all our panelists here. What are you most excited to see in this next decade? I know we've mentioned battery storage and just, investments in more clean energy, all of the above, but if anyone would like to jump in, what are you most excited to see in this next decade?
I'll jump in. California, actually, if we set our minds to it, we can, I don't know that we'll get to 100% everything decarbonized in 10 years, but we could absolutely decarbonize the electric grid as we start plugging in our cars, and we can build the 21st century energy grid that we need to power our lives on renewables. We can do that this decade and just put me out of a job. It's my hope. I can retire in 10 years because we've arrived. But that's honestly, that's what we're all driving for. That is what we're heading for while helping keep prices down and democratizing clean energy. That's what we're aiming for, and we can get there, at least in California, and then show the rest of the world how to do it.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. First of all, I would love to be put out of a job. That'd be great. And it's why we're in this business, is to get out of this business. And one of the looking a decade ahead is the rise of renewables should hopefully coincide with the phase out of fossil fuels, and the very tangible effects of that I think is something to look forward to and also accelerate, because this means healthier communities. This means cleaner water, cleaner air. And I mean that very, very genuinely. It's and you have to look no further than Orange County and what we saw down in San Diego this last month, where there are tar balls coming up on shore as people are wanting to bring their families to the beach or go surfing. And thankfully it was a very quick response, but there shouldn't have to be this problem. And so hopefully in a decade, and we won't have to see that as we phase these out and the growth of renewables continue.
Can I, Jolie, before you talk, I want you to talk, but I just want to respond really quickly, Brian. We crunched the numbers after that oil spill, and we found that just 4 solar roofs offset all of the oil that was spilled in Orange County in October, just 4. And so that, to your point, right, that
Yes.
This is not, and this has been a thing that Environment California has been good about also saying, is these are not disasters that are inevitable. They're inevitable only in that oil is dangerous and messy, but they're not inevitable in that we don't have to stay addicted to it. And so anyway, I just think it's a really good point. I wanted to share that cool statistic.
No, agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can jump in here. Thank you, Bernadette. I'm glad you jumped in with that tidbit. And I would echo the sentiments of, so much excitement in just transitioning to renewables generally. And then obviously, as an offshore wind associate, I'm a little biased, so I can speak a little bit to what I'm looking forward to with offshore wind in the next decade. I think with the Biden administration's goal of reaching that 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, so many states are really stepping up their goals to make that national goal a reality. And in California specifically, I'm really looking forward to seeing the California Energy Commission set an ambitious goal for the state. And I'm also just looking forward to watching the 16 current offshore wind project proposals across the nation hopefully go from abstract plans to real wind farms that are in the ocean. So it's really exciting to kind of see all these different elements unfolding in real time.
And maybe I can jump in here, Jolie, and ask you a more specific question about offshore wind. There's been a lot of talk about federal incentives around clean energy, and I was wondering if you could share how will federal tax incentives currently being considered in the Build Back Better Act impact offshore wind investments in California and beyond?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think that by kind of adding those incentives in, we can really, I think that can really help California become a leader by tapping into all the power off our coasts. And furthermore, I have really great confidence that we can make this happen in our work with the most recent bill, AB 525. It's a really great example that California is ready to set high goals. And, tax incentive things and Build Back Better are only going to make that easier, more possible, and help make sure that those goals come to fruition.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. AB 525, it was a joy to work on that bill over the past year, and just the broad coalition that we were able to build around the bill. It's great to see clean energy and how it's motivating for so many people from so many different backgrounds. I'm going to turn to an audience question next. Marissa is asking, as we switch towards battery storage, what's the plan for dealing with the resulting e-waste? Battery is far better than oil, gas, and coal, but we do need to consider the chemicals they leach when they're disposed of. If anyone wants to address that.
I'll take that one. Got storage in my middle name here. Absolutely. It is absolutely critical that we recycle batteries when they have spent out their useful life. So we reuse them and we recycle them. And of course, before that, it's like the old adage, we should also reduce. So energy efficiency, conservation, management of our energy usage is critical, in addition to renewable energy. So we can reduce our need for battery storage as well as everything else if we follow those steps. But we are going to need a lot of batteries. They are made up of minerals that are not only mined from the earth, but are then reusable. They're not made up of, really bad stuff. It's just stuff that needs to then be broken back apart and reutilized. So there's a couple things that are already happening. Frankly, this is a bigger problem for the EV market. Than a car battery is about 6 times the size as a typical home battery. So that really is, and we're selling more EVs right now than we're selling home batteries. So that really is the place to focus. But what's interesting is there are a couple of initiatives right now that take spent car batteries, and you can then string them together and actually install them in buildings and have a spent car battery that's too weak now to drive a big giant heavy vehicle 60 miles per hour down the road, but could keep your refrigerator lights on for 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever you need. So we want to reuse those batteries, and there's sort of a secondary market that will come as we grow the market for both of energy storage on the grid as well as EVs. So that I'm really excited about. And there's a whole cottage industry that is promoting that idea. We don't have a big enough market yet. So we got to grow the market, and then we can come up with ingenious ways to reuse our resources. And then, like paper and glass and aluminum, if you've followed recycling, it is not a moneymaker. So if the government, we need to work together as a society to create a market for recycling of these precious commodities that we are extracting from our planet. That's going to take policy, and it's probably going to take some government funding. So we do it together as a society. So we need to get there, but we have not yet even put in place a big enough market for that type of thing. So we got to drive the market and then drive the recycling markets in addition to that. So that's my quick answer. It's totally where we need to go, but I'm excited about it. There's solutions out there. We just have to, it's all market driven and policy driven.
Thanks for answering that, Bernadette. So I want to turn it over to solar for a minute. California has been a leader in solar. We consistently lead in growth year after year. And I was hoping, Bernadette and Dave, you could maybe speak to the benefits of policies like net metering and how they've helped turn California into such a solar leader.
You go first. Dave.
That was Bernadette basically saying this guy. Well, I mean, the foundation, the reason why California, the main reason, not the only reason, there's a whole history here, but, including the Million Solar Roofs initiative that was put in place, now a little over 15 years ago. But the foundation of rooftop solar is net metering. And net metering, for those who don't know, is just it's the way when you have solar on your roof and you make it, and most of the time it makes energy and then it's powering your lights and your fridge and all that other stuff. But many times during the day, you're making more energy than you're using. And when that happens, the energy goes out the wires, literally spins your meter backwards. It goes out into your neighborhood, and then the utility sells that energy, your energy, to your neighbors, and then gives you a credit on your bill that you can then apply later on when the sun is not shining, when you have to buy electricity from the grid. And it is this very elegant way with which your solar can get shared with the community. You can get fairly compensated for it. That has allowed rooftop solar to really work, really work, and integrate with the grid in ways that then have multiple benefits. I mean, first is just that then more middle and working class people can get the solar. That's kind of thing number one. But number two is that extra energy can then get efficiently used in the community. And because then you and your neighbors are able to use that extra energy very, very efficiently, we reduce our use of long distance power lines and other grid infrastructure, which then reduces the cost of the grid for everybody on the order of like billions and billions and billions of dollars, and then just helps add to the drive towards getting more renewable energy. Absolutely one of the most important policies we have. We have to keep it in place. We'll talk later. There is a very big effort underway by the utilities to gut net metering. And this is really an existential threat to rooftop solar that people need to know about. But that's my plug for the foundational policy. Again, not the only one. And there's a whole stack on top of it that can help supercharge it, especially for working class families. But you got to start there. That's the foundation.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly, net metering is that foundation in California. It's the foundation of all distributed solar technologies throughout the United States. And it's behind all of our building codes. So I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but California has recently adopted two critically important building codes related to solar plus batteries. So now every single new home in California has to come with a solar system. And soon we're going to mandate that they all come with a battery as well. And then in addition to that, all commercial properties have to come with a battery. They went opposite there, and pretty much you're going to be sure to charge that battery with solar panels on the roof. The reason why this is so important is because A, it's going to standardize the technology into our built environment, but also it's going to give everybody access to solar in ways that there've been a split incentive, right? If you live in a rental property, there are some programs right now to get solar in the hands of you as a renter. So we're actually building solar roofs for over 300,000 low-income renters right now in California. A lot of people don't know that, but it's really huge. It's really exciting. We can do that because these are sort of government-regulated affordable housing projects, so we can kind of force, and in fact, the nonprofits that run those projects want to do good things for their tenants. But there's a whole market out there that is just market rate renters. If that mandate that I mentioned covers every building. So whether you're building an apartment for whomever, you're going to have to build with solar, and that solar is going to have to benefit the renters and the tenants. We create this level playing field. Every landlord has to abide by starting in the next year or two. So these are some of the ideas, and that policy can get us over some of these barriers that are about income and access and control and blah, blah, blah. And it's all based on net metering. So that's the foundation. We got to keep that strong, and then we can go from there. And there's lots, the sky's the limit on what we can do to get solar in the hands of everybody, as well as obviously grow other renewable energy resources.
Thank you. That's an amazing initiative. As a renter myself, I'd love to see solar panels on every single roof across the state. You touched on this a little bit, Dave, but I also want to ask, can you speak to why some entities are pressuring the Public Utilities Commission to gut helpful programs like net metering?
Yeah, let me tell you the what and then the why. So the what is that California's investor-owned utilities, PG&E, SoCal Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric, are in a full-throated lobbying effort to get the CPUC to make some changes to net metering. The two changes are as follows. One is to hit people, hit consumers with a penalty fee of between $30 and $91 a month just for putting solar panels on your rooftop. Second part of it is then to gut the credit that solar users get for sharing their extra energy with the grid by about 80%. And when you put those two things together, you essentially double the cost of going solar, and you roll us back to where we were 15 years ago when there wasn't very much solar and the only people that could get it were wealthy. So that's what they're pushing for. The CPUC, it's the California Public Utilities Commission, will make a decision on this in early next year. And there's a huge campaign going on. Over 100,000 people have submitted a public comment to both the CPUC and Governor Newsom, who appoints the members of the CPUC. There's over 500 nonprofit organizations, including Environment California, thank you very much, and the city of San Diego, thank you very much, who just adopted a resolution early this week, the biggest city in the state to take a stand on behalf of the little guy and the little gal. But then the why is very, very simple, greed. Utilities make their money building and maintaining long distance power lines, which are all, incidentally, the things that spark the wildfires and cause the blackouts. Every dollar that they spend, they make a guaranteed 8 to 10% profit on it. It's their business model. When people make their own energy locally, they still use the grid, but they use it less. That reduces wear and tear on those power lines, which reduces the need to build and maintain them. And it's estimated, some of the best modeling that's been done, estimates that if we keep rooftop solar growing, along with all the other energy resources, that would cut $120 billion in the cost of decarbonizing our economy. And most of those savings come from reducing the need to have to build long distance power lines and associated infrastructure. Utilities can still make a profit on it, but they're going to make less profit than if they just controlled everything. And when you are a 150-year-old monopoly that is used to utter domination, they don't give up that domination very easily. And so they basically don't want to share the table and want to just take the rooftop solar off the table. So it's greed, pure and simple.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to comment on San Diego's position on net metering. You're just mentioned by Dave there.
No, I appreciated the shout out, and it was a resolution that the city council adopted this past Monday. It went through the environment committee, which my boss sat on, and was happy to move forward out of committee. And it takes as you said, we're the largest city in California to do so, and it's especially as a region in Southern California and the city of San Diego in particular that has a high residential solar adoption rate. It's something that we hear from our residents. We do not want to slow down. We want to make this cost effective. We want to make sure that we can continue growing residential solar at the rate that we are, but also make sure that we're also expanding into communities that have not had that option or feel that they have not had that option. And so, of course, what we've seen presented to the CPUC is scary, and we've been hearing from people how concerning that is. So, to really voice our opinion and have the council members unanimously actually sign this resolution was very good to see.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's great to hear about the unanimous support from the council members.
Yes.
I'd like to also talk about, the Build Back Better Act has been in the news a lot. And so I was curious if any of you could speak to how federal tax incentives considered in the act will impact solar adoption in California.
I'll jump in. The federal investment tax credit is a really important way of making solar and batteries more affordable to average everyday people. It cuts the cost of going solar right now about 24%. The Build Back Better is going to up that so we can drive the market even further and faster by just making it more affordable for people. And what's really, really cool, if you are thinking about how do we build a more inclusive clean energy market, is we're looking at making the tax credit also a rebate if you don't have a high tax liability. So all of that is fancy way of saying, if you make a lot of money, you're going to owe a lot of taxes. So a big credit on your bill, on your tax bill at the end of the year, is money in your pocket. That helps make solar more affordable. If you actually don't make tons of money, you don't have a high tax liability, but you still need all of that money back to help cut off the cost of the solar system. So for the first time, we are getting Congress, we've been trying to get this for years, to turn that credit into a rebate so you get it whether you have that high tax liability or not. This is amazing for both retirees and low and working class taxpayers to be able to invest in that solar system. These are what I talk about when I say like these are just policy barrier. Like we create these barriers ourselves. The sun is shining on everybody's roof and the solar panels are, indiscriminate. They'll work wherever. And we just need to get the policy barriers set aside. One of the folks on this webinar, we're talking right now off the side about how do you do this with with apartment buildings. And I'll put my email in the chat. Anybody that has follow-up questions about rooftop solar, feel free to email me. But there are ways. We have lobbied and gotten the Public Utilities Commission, for example, and the legislature to adopt a thing called virtual net metering. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's a way for somebody who owns an apartment building, one solar system that then you get all the electrons to flow evenly to all of your tenants. And it's a way to basically make net metering work for you. It's brilliant. It's available in PG&E and all of the investor-owned utility territories. Unfortunately, some of our public utilities have not been so progressive. So if you live in Sacramento or Los Angeles or some of our publicly owned utilities, you'll need to work with us to try to push your utility in that direction. But lots more to say. But that's one quick thing about the investment tax credit. We're super excited. We hope the Senate approves it. And if we do, we'll be able to accelerate this whole clean energy market by just making it more affordable to everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, Bernadette. And also Bronte just dropped in the chat a link if you'd like to take action to protect rooftop solar. So please visit that to send a letter or a message to Governor Newsom. But I want to turn it over to transportation, electric vehicles now. California has a storied history of vehicle pollution. I think that a lot of us are familiar with those images of Los Angeles in the 70s, but we recently hit a milestone that I mentioned earlier. We hit 1 million electric vehicles sold in California, and we did it ahead of schedule. This is actually a goal that Environment California helped convince Governor Brown to set back in 2013. And so I'd like to pose a question, kind of an open question, but how are you already seeing electric vehicles change the landscape of transportation in your community?
I don't think this is my issue
Yeah.
area, but I'm an electric car driver. I have a family of 4, and we ditched our internal combustion engine cars back in 2014, and we don't ever see ourselves going back. It's so nice to drive an electric car. If any of you have not yet drove a car or experienced it, you won't ever want to go back either. I mean, just the driving experience is so superior. And I don't drive a Tesla, I just drive regular old, cars, but it's so great. So I just think it's changing. I think once more and more people, and I live in just a very middle-class neighborhood, and we are starting to count every house that has an EV in the driveway. My kids make it a game of like, oh, look at now that neighbor. So we're seeing it pop up, just like we're seeing rooftop solar pop up. And what we need to get to, though, is those of us who are kind of quote unquote early adopters. We're creating the market for this, but we need to obviously get everybody on board so that every driveway, so those fossil fuel cars are the exception to the rule and not the standard, which is still the case, right? I drive around Sacramento, 99% of the cars on the road, as excited I am about the progress, are still fossil fuel combustion, as if, and I know a lot of us are still driving them. It's hard to change, but I don't know. It just changes the driving experience. And once you go, it's impossible to go back, I think is the simplest experience. But this is me. The other thing I can say is there's a lot of talk about grid to vehicle to grid ideas, right? So the Ford F-150 is coming out with an electric truck that you can then actually, through a solar contractor, plug your electric truck into your home and power your refrigerator through the truck. I mentioned the truck battery is going to have probably about 6 to 10 times the capacity of a regular battery. So that's totally exciting. The sky's the limit on what we can do. Integrating, once we get everybody using the same fuel, electricity kind of is easier to work with. And so we can kind of just go there and soak up all of those solar electrons from tons and tons of solar panels on roofs and get ourselves to decarbonize transportation as well as the light bulbs in our homes.
Absolutely. And it's incredible to see the innovation in electric vehicles. I feel that every month that goes by, I'm passed by more and more on the highway. But I saw, Brian, that you were unmuted earlier, and I'd also like to ask you an additional question. What are some of the current challenges to expanding EV adoption, and how is San Diego working to address this?
No, thanks for asking that. And I say this as a recent owner of an EV myself, my wife and I. And I will say we were maybe a month into having an EV, and my wife said, now we're going to own two. And we're not there yet, but it's soon. I can see it in the future. And also, I'm grateful. My boss, Councilmember Joe LaCava, also an EV driver, and it's an experience that both of us, I think, can, when we go out into the community and talk to the council members' constituents, that we're able to speak from experience on this, alleviate a lot of fears that people still have. And one of the things that's nice, actually, in our district is a neighborhood called Carmel Valley, and it's 92130, and I believe it is number 2 or number 3 in EV ownership in the country. And it was a statistic that we were surprised, but also excited to hear about a couple months ago. And what we've seen from that is what makes sense. It's a single family home area predominantly, where people have generally access to charging at home and can park in their garage, charge overnight, and which is what you want out of the EV experience, to make sure that there's not a lot of pressure on the grid during the day, especially in the late afternoon and evening. What we've seen and kind of taken from that is, how do we, and to answer your question, Lizzie, how do we look at the rest of the city and where we have lower adoption rates, and how do we make that more accessible for those communities? It's, I actually fall into the category of someone who lives in a multifamily building where I can't charge at home and I can't charge at night. So really dependent on charging at work and at the office, and or going to a charging station, during the day or over the weekend. So how are we doing that? And that's something my boss is really focusing on, especially with this update to our climate action plan, is how do we get charging into the community? Is it, in parks? Is it in our public right of way? We have a great opportunity as a city to use our city-owned lands for charging and make that, take that cost down, hopefully, for the installation and the operation. But also just working with communities on saying, where do you want charging at? What will make this more helpful for you to be an EV adopter? And I will also say, one of the things, tying it again to our climate action plan, that when it was first adopted back in 2015, December 2015, we had EV goals around our city fleet, ones that we need to do a lot of work on, I will say, but we didn't expand it beyond that. And then 6 years later, our goals are now about not just the city fleet, but overall EV adoption, and really looking at electric VMT throughout the city, because, and I think these are really achievable goals because of how that culture is shifting towards EVs. Obviously, the state of California is only going to be selling EVs come 2030, 2035. So it's something that, 6 years ago would never have expected to see that on paper. And now I think that, the question is our goal too low? Can we increase it? So happy to see that. I think that's how the culture has shifted.
Just to sort of build on that, Lizzie, if I may. So a part of Environment California's campaign right now for the Go EV City campaign is basically meeting with people like Brian and Councilmember LaCava and local jurisdictions all over the state to see where they are currently in the EV charging process, and sort of look to see how we can continue to move them forward. So in addition to just in the requirements of AB 6, which is looking to accelerate the streamlining of EV charging permitting, we're also looking to see which jurisdictions are ready and willing to set big, bold investments in a clean transportation future. And every jurisdiction, every city, every county has a different budget, has a different constituency, and has different needs. So in addition to just traditional things like adopting an EV fleet, you can also consider things like adopting EV-friendly building codes or making investments in clean transportation systems, whether that's electric school buses or electric bikes. So there's ways to ensure clean transportation outside of just the typical buy an electric car, because as many people in the chat have mentioned, there are some cost barriers and things like that that may inhibit people from buying an electric vehicle. Thankfully, the Build Back Better bill, if it makes its way through the Senate, will have a tax credit for purchases on EV cars. I believe the baseline is now you get at least $4,000 if you qualify or meet the qualifications, but up to $12,500 in refundable tax credits. There are some movements being made to incentivize and help lower the cost of electric vehicles, but there's also other things cities can do outside of electric vehicles to ensure a greener transportation system as well.
Yeah, Ben, thank you for mentioning that. Could you maybe speak to some of those things outside of electric vehicles?
Yeah, so some of the ideas and plans that have been floating around are increasing the use of electric bikes. So I know that there are some cities that are piloting electric bike programs and bike share programs, or even electric vehicle car sharing programs have been mentioned. Another popular one is investing in electric buses. So rather than increasing the number of cars on the road via electric vehicles, just increasing the electric transportation of public transportation. So that sort of removes the emissions of people, I guess, buying cars. If they're EVs, then you don't have any tailpipe emissions, which is great. But general transportation use is generally better for traffic and for the environment than buying new cars. So investments in public transportation. There's also other investments like creating more incentives, whether that's lowering the cost of getting a parking pass or charging. So things like net metering, and also just regulating the price that's being set for charging stations in general. There's a lot of different things. There's also just general building code things and parking permitting that can just make it easier for people to make the transition to clean energy vehicles.
Absolutely. We really have to change how we get from point A to point B to address transportation related pollution. So it's great to hear. Thanks so much for sharing that, Ben. And in these last few minutes, I want to turn it over to Jolie and talk a little bit more about wind. I was really excited to see our California delegation at COP26 visit the floating wind turbines off the coast of Scotland. And so, Jolie, I'm curious to know, where does California stand in terms of tapping into offshore wind power?
Yeah, absolutely. So California does not currently have any offshore wind in operation, and because of that, the state is not ranked at the top of the list in wind energy growth. However, we know that we could become a leader if we tap into the power of our coastal winds. And furthermore, like I mentioned earlier, we have confidence that that can happen through the most recent bill, AB 525, which is California's offshore wind bill that was passed in September. That bill, I think, like I said, it really sets, or at least it directs the California Energy Commission to set goals for 2030 and for 2045. So continued goals. And we just want to see the state set those ambitious goals. And another great example of offshore wind moving forward in California is the start of the environmental assessment process with the Morro Bay Wind Energy Area, which also recently began. So we're really just looking forward to working with the CEC to keep offshore wind moving forward and making progress.
Great, that's great to hear. We had a question earlier in the chat, maybe you can answer it. Someone asked, aren't offshore wind projects harmful to sea life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that impact to sea life is a pretty common concern, and it's certainly something that there is still room to learn more about. Duke University actually is beginning a study to really look closely into those impacts. But I think that the most important thing to remember is that we already know that climate change and that non-renewable forms of energy do have a harmful impact on sea life and all sorts of wildlife for that matter. So we really need to do something to protect our wildlife by improving our energy systems. And we have also actually seen in some pilot projects in offshore wind that those foundations have actually provided new habitat for little ecological communities. And we have really actually seen that certain sea life communities flourish around those offshore wind projects. So obviously we still have more to learn, but what we've seen so far has been encouraging, and we know that we can't go on the way that we have been previously. So that would be how I would address that concern right now.
Absolutely. Thanks for answering that, Julie. Well, I'd like to, start wrapping up. I just want to make sure that everyone said what they'd like to say. Is there anyone that would like to add any final comments?
I thought one of your participants asked what are our legislative ideas for the coming year. So I just wanted to quickly answer that because I think maybe it's interesting looking ahead. So obviously the net metering fight that Dave mentioned is at the Public Utilities Commission. We expect it to come to a head in January, February. We kind of are thinking about nothing but that. But looking ahead, we've got 3 proposals that we are teeing up for the legislature, and we'll see if anybody bites and introduces it as a bill. And Environment California is a leader on these. One is streamlined permitting for solar batteries and EVs, as well as other home electrification technologies through a thing called the Solar App. It's just a free to use app that the Department of Energy has created for all jurisdictions across the country. If we can do that, then it's standardized and simplified. It cuts red tape and cuts costs. It's sort of boring, but it's one of those grease of the wheels of actual business and consumer experience that means a lot. So that's one. 2 is money for electrification and for green energy, and specifically related to upgrading the grid. One of the things nobody really thinks about is when you live in an older home, your home has an old electric panel and it can't handle an induction stove, an electric car, a solar panel. It's just old, outdated infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, but that's expensive. So we're going to have a budget surplus this year. Let's pour some of that money into a green economy and help get everybody in on our electrification movement by subsidizing replacing out service panels. It would be a job creator. It would make that home then ready to enter the 21st century and remove that barrier. So it's just obvious stuff like that. We should be incentivizing batteries and EVs more than we do. We don't do it enough. and then we want to do this thing called virtual power plants, but that's too boring and I've taken too much time talking. So if anybody's interested in that, email me. But those are our 3 big ideas for 2022.
Thanks so much, Bernadette. That sounds really exciting. Really excited to work on that this next year. Great. Well, does anyone want to add any other final comment? Great. Well, I just want to thank you so much to all of our panelists here. Thanks for joining us on this Friday morning. Thank you, Bernadette, Brian, Dave, Jolie. Looking forward to working on these issues in the future. And thanks for spending this time reflecting on a decade of growth with us. Here's to another decade of even more growth. So I hope you enjoy the weekend, and all of our attendees, please know you can reach out to me if you'd like any more information or contacts to our speakers. But I hope you all have a good weekend, and thank you so much.
You guys are the best. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.